This episode is sponsored by James Tiffany's Shipyard Shenanigans, and if you like a bit of Glasgow humour, you like a bit of Billy Connolly, say, then this one might be for you. It's a comedy podcast, and it's available on all podcast apps. Hello and welcome back to Film Pro Productivity and Success, the podcast that helps film professionals and other creative people to live a more focused, effective and happy life, or so I hope. My name is Carter Ferguson and this is episode 113, a quick catch-up. No battle was ever won according to plan, but no battle was ever won without one. Dwight D. Eisenhower, unquote. And yes, hello and welcome to this, the first episode of Season 9, which follows on directly, the very next week in fact, from 8. And I should have it written somewhere. This is a catch-up episode. It's maybe not quite as smooth and delicate as a usual episode. Let me just look up what the last episode was. Hold on. 112. Oh, Brain Dumps. That was a great episode. I listened to that myself. Yeah, I do Brain Dumps all the time, and I find them really, really useful. So if that's something that interests you, untangling your brain, untangling your thoughts, go back to last week's episode and have a listen. But as I say, this is now the first episode of Season 9. It's a catch-up episode where I'll be discussing how things are going for me and what's coming up in the next season. Also, I want to say, incidentally, a big... Not really incidentally, I want to say definitely a very big thank you once again to David Richard Thompson, who kindly took on the position of executive producer on Season 8. And I also would like to give a big welcome to my good friend Christopher McPhillips from Artos Digital, who is taking up the executive producer baton for this season. Thanks to both of you guys. And what a season that will be. As a productivity guy, I'm still a big fan of batching my episode recordings, and I've already recorded some of these. But for your information, Season 9 will consist of this episode is going to kick it off. Then episode 114, No Good Deed Goes Unpunished. That might give you a clue about what it's about. Episode 115, Taking Breaks and Holidays, which has been researched and written by my good friend Ian O'Neill from the How They Did It filmmaking podcast. And incidentally, this was something that was actually prepped before COVID, but because of all the new things that were happening at COVID, it got put away and put aside, and I'm only getting round to doing it now. But Taking Breaks and Holidays is episode 115. Episode 116 is Toxic People Part 2, and I've just done a Toxic People episode maybe a couple of episodes ago, hoping that it was successful, and yes, it was successful, and there was a lot of interaction online about that one. It really is important to get these people out of your lives, because if you've got a toxic people kind of close to you, toxic person I should say, close to you, it's really going to drag you down, so look out for that one. Episode 117 is called Rediscovering Passion. That's something that I think creatives struggle with, and it's something I wanted to dip into. Episode 118 is The Devil's in the Detail, and this is coming up again and again and again. In fact, let me look up while I'm on. Hold on, I'll pause for a second. Right, I'm back. Had to pause. Something's come out today on social media. James Gunn, who directed the Guardians of the Galaxy, I think episodes 1 and 2 of that, films 1 and 2 of that, it has been talking today about how he feels Hollywood is deteriorating, and the two things he raises are, one, disorganized productions finished with shooting with unfinished scripts, which is definitely a problem, and two, unprepared directors. And that really is what I'm coming to with The Devil's in the Detail. If you are not ready to go, if the script is not ready, if you are not prepared to go, you're going to have a disaster with whatever you go ahead with. And this all comes back down to productivity and preparation and having a plan. And the thing is, of course, if you've got a plan, even if you divert from that plan, you know what you're diverting from, and you can always bring it back again. Good things about plans as well are that sometimes you go into a day and you're not maybe quite as on it as you could be. If you've already prepped your plan, you can lean heavily on that plan, and that will get you to the end of a shoot day, for example, if you're directing a film, which is specifically where I see this become an issue for me. But anyway, I've already went off on one. What was I talking about? That was The Devil's in the Detail, and that's episode 118. Episode 119 is Technology Addiction, which is written and researched by producer Christina Littleson, and that's another one which I struggle with. You've heard me talk about it quite often. Specifically, it's YouTube. There's so much great stuff on YouTube that I can get really drawn into it, and I can find that I can spend 3-4 hours watching YouTube videos and not actually get any work done. It's definitely a drag on my productivity. And another great example, of course, is just buying new kit. Trying to get the latest piece of kit is a big problem that people suffer from. And then unrecorded as yet. I think I've not recorded that one. I think that's the one I'm at. And again, that's one that was prepared for before COVID. So I'm going to rework that a little bit and shorten it a little bit for this season, because as you know, I'm putting these episodes out a little bit shorter than they used to be. But unrecorded as yet, I also have episode 120, which is procrastination versus laziness. And I've had this question come up a few times, so I think that's worth me looking into. I haven't worked on it yet, but I think that's worth a try. Episode 121 is 3 more lessons from Abo Demi Demi. And I've got to be asking here, do you like these shows where I take Abo Demi Demi's thoughts and I reinterpret them or represent them to you? I like doing them. I love the guy. I think he's fantastic, Demi Demi. But please let me know if it's something you want to hear more of. I just think he comes from an interesting perspective, and he's usually talking about stuff that I agree with. So that's why I like to do those ones. Episode 122 is about the focus funnel. Episode 123 is why who we spend time with really matters. I'll probably think of a better title than that, but it's a riff on that. You become the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, effectively. And episode 124 is list your weaknesses. Episode 125 is the productivity cycle. I go on about it and on about it, but I'm not sure that ever gets through to people that there is a cycle that needs to be completed without jumping parts of it in order for you to keep your energy going. That's 125. And finally, in this season, it's episode 126, prosperity consciousness. And that's talking about things like the book The Secret, which, what is it? I had something written on my board. It's like prosperity consciousness is nothing without action. You can't just think positive thoughts. You actually have to take action with it. But that's what I'm going to be playing with on that one. And that, in theory, unless I change it, which sometimes I do, is going to be season 9. Now, the quote at the top of the show will give you an idea of how my year has been going so far. Dwight D. Eisenhower said, "No battle was ever won according to plan, but no battle was ever won without one." And as I launched season 8, I also began a 12-week year, but it hasn't really gone according to plan, if I'm entirely honest. But these things happen, you know. The plan got broken down several times as the 12-week year proceeded, and that was really as a result of financial pressures and other worries. And had I ignored them, it would have meant that my creative development work, the projects I had on my board that I was trying to focus on for 12 weeks, that work would have ended up in the toilet and possibly into the gutter along with me, because I had to really refocus on earning some money. My initial goals, in fact, tailed off probably by about week 3, week 2.5, when I realised that my projected work that I was expecting to come in just didn't start to come in. And after 2 years of COVID killing my fight work with 2 metre distance and making fight direction, which is my main income, very, very difficult to get jobs on. Although I was doing bits and bobs, they were never long contracts. You know, I think the longest contract was on the James McAvoy movie My Son. That was 10 days. That was the longest contract I had in that whole 2 years. So dropping from perhaps, half a year where I'm employed, because fights aren't in every day of a production, unless you're doing something like the Outpost movies with Black Camel, which was a few years ago now, where I was on every single day. Largely my contracts are maybe 1 day, 2 day, 3 day. At the moment, I'm working on a really great, cool show called Mayflies, and I've only actually got 4 days on it plus the recce. So, that's a good contract for me, but I need to have a number of people employing me throughout the year in order that I can pay my bills. Anyway, when things didn't pick up as I was expecting them to, and the employment, really what was happening was I was getting booked for fight jobs, and then they were getting cancelled, and really it came down to one specific fight contract where I wasn't contracted, that's the wrong word. I was asked to keep available 10 weeks, and I didn't think I'd be working on the project for 10 weeks, but I thought I might get maybe 10 days over the 10 weeks, which would have been fantastic. When they eventually booked me only for 4 days of the 10 weeks, and I had thought that 10-week run of work was going to come in while I was doing my 12-week year. So that started disappearing rapidly. They cancelled it. They cancelled one day within a day of booking me for 4. And then it became 3. And then it became 2. And then it became, yes, I ended up only on 1 day of that job. But I was leaning heavily on that job. And in the hope that my regular gig River City was going to come back after COVID with a bit of force and a lot of fights. But it did come back, but it didn't come back with any force. I think it was something like 6 weeks before I got 1 day on it. And as of this point, which is about 10 weeks maybe into their shoot period, I've only had 2 days work on that. So all of this meant that I really was getting worried about spending, focusing my time on something, developing 3 film projects, 2 documentary projects, and 1 feature to be specific. That spending my time on that with no income was a really, really bad idea. So I adapted from those initial plans, and I focused down instead on commercial work. I had been shooting a few commercial things. I have shot commercial work over the years, but it doesn't come to me very often, and I don't go looking for it. So I focused heavily on that for a while. But the timing for that was not great because it was a standing start, and I had to wait for a few people to come back from holidays and things like that. And really, it was only the beginning of August that those people started to come back from holidays and just have time to communicate with me on things. Anyway, lo and behold, after several weeks where I'd spent focusing down on commercial work, and I wasn't even fully into it, but I was trying to rewire my brain to work on these things. My main thing is drama. It is not commercial work. But focusing down on this as a director, producer, lo and behold, what started to happen? The fight gigs started coming back. They started coming back in serious terms. As I say, I'm on Mayflies at the moment. I'm also on some River City. I was doing a shoot called Dog Days with James Price, great local director, and that was working with Hopscotch Films, who are awesome as well. And I've got another short shoot next week, and I've done something else which I can't even remember. And that's what happened. All this stuff came in at once, and you've got to realise when you're working on multiple productions at one time, from a productivity point of view, every communication is multiplied. So if I'm talking to people about days or contracts or whatever, I've got to have that conversation 5 times. It's not like one big job that would cover the lot. I've got to have that conversation again and again. I've got to pin down the dates again and again. I've got to do everything, all the risk assessments again and again. It's just constant adaptation, and it really, really takes over. So that was the kind of final nail in the coffin for that 12-week year. So this has been a 12-week year filled with adaptation, and it's certainly one I'd regard as a failure, but there are lessons to be learned from it. And I'm not the only one that was doing a 12-week year at this point, by the way. I was interacting with my friend Jim, who was also doing one, and his wife was doing one as well. And he abandoned his and has just recently restarted it, whereas I adapted mine. And although I adapted it kind of unsuccessfully in the end, I have kind of ended up with a semi-successful amount of work done over that period, although it's been in lumps. It's not been a satisfying full stop at the end of 12 weeks. But what is my full stop to it is I am currently doing Zero Draft 30, which is the go into the story. Hold on, I need to pause you. It's Scott Myers. I know him as @go into the story on Twitter, and I just couldn't come up with his first name there on that one. But he runs this thing, and I did it last year. I talked about it, where you write a script in 30 days. And I'm kind of cheating a little bit on this one, but I'm in day 2 or day 3, I think it's the 3rd today, of revamping. I'm rewriting, or redrafting is perhaps the right word, the film that I wrote last year, but I'm coming to it with a whole load of ideas and thoughts which I had kind of run out of by the time I wrote the first draft. So it's been a full year since I wrote draft 1, and I'm coming at that one again right now. And it's not a 12-week year, it's a 30-day drive, and I think that's going to be successful for me. But 12-week years, what I would say is, if you're struggling and you've got to say week 3 and something comes in that's completely throwing you, try put a pause on it instead of just giving up, because each time you have to restart it. It's about this cycle of productivity. Every time you restart it, it's still 12 weeks away. Whereas if you can get 3 weeks into something, pause it, go on holiday. I got a holiday in there in those 12 weeks as well, by the way, for a week, and that was another delay. But pause it and then come back to it and continue on. That way, you'll always feel like you're moving forward in it. I think that always restarting it, it'll always be too far away, Whereas if you can just say, put that pause in, that's a good thing. So, yeah, 12-week years, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But there's always something to be learned from them. And you can certainly acknowledge your advancements at the end of that period, even if you feel it's kind of went off the boil somewhere along the line. I've incidentally also made some changes to how I'm operating my fight contracts, my fight direction business, as it were. I am fightdirector.com, if you don't know that. And I'm no longer going to be recommending people for free to productions, is one thing that's come up. And the reason for that is I keep time and again negotiating or speaking to people about if they're available for a production, because the production's asked me to find someone to play a specific role that's, let's say, can lift someone on their shoulders. That was a guy called Jack I had out yesterday. He was awesome, from Scare Scotland, who have sponsored a few shows. Big Stevie at Scare Scotland supplied him. He was brilliant. But like, I'll quite often have to cast people to play small action roles that might be fighters. Usually the people who are going to end up dead by the end of the episode, or who are going to rough somebody up. I'm no longer recommending people for free, because what keeps on happening is I for free organise somebody to come in and do something, and then that production never calls them. And it's happened twice in the last 3 months. One of them was on that 10-week job, which was really, really aggravating, because I spoke to them specifically about how important it was that they contact this person, because I had told them he was going to get a call and they never did, and it makes me look foolish. So I think that some productions, some people do not value what you do for free, but they would value what you do that they've paid for, basically, if that makes sense to you. So me putting a monetary value to what I'm doing for them is not me trying to steal money from them, because I've always done it for free, and it's been 27 years I've been doing it for free. But at this point, I'm sick of me being left looking foolish when they don't phone the person I've arranged to play the part, because they're so disorganised. Again, it comes back to that James Gunn social media at the moment. I'm trying to call it up on my phone. Can you tell he actually talked about just how disorganised most productions are, and how unfinished most scripts on big movies are as they start shooting? You've got to realise the chaos, the absolute chaos, even with brilliant, brilliant people, that surrounds putting a production together, and it's just too easy for them to forget something that's very, very important to you. So that's one thing I'm doing. Another thing I'm going to do is, because of that thing that came up where, you know, I was asked to keep 10 weeks available, it became 4 days booking. I gave them a rate based on 4 days, which was a reduced rate. I ended up doing 1 day on that. So a new thing that I'm doing is I'm going to say, if you want me for 10 days, my rate is this. If you want me for 5 days, my rate is this. If you keep cutting days, that is, you will come to this rate, which is my highest rate, which will be for 1 day. And there's another thing along that. The more time and bother you go through communicating with something, with production, you know, I had to read 4 scripts, I had to read 4 scenes, I had to start preparing 4 risk assessments for 1 scene to get cut, 2 scenes to get cut, 3 scenes to get cut. You know, it's all work for me. These people start to get billed for the more time that they waste of mine, and they don't like it, but I think you're given a degree of respect when you talk straight about money. And that's another thing I'd say has come up in the last 12 weeks, is don't pussyfoot around when you are agreeing rates. You might want to very specifically say and put it in writing, even if you feel embarrassed by talking about money, that if you are going out to say shoot on something that's far away, that you're going to charge them a half day travel or half your standard rate, then you plus your full rate for your day's filming, whatever you're going to do, or creative work, whatever you're doing. You want to maybe consider talking to them as well, or just pull it straight out and say, is there any per diems? Do I get any money for time spent away, for food, etc.? And you want to definitely be talking about fuel at this point. You know, it's so expensive. It used to be 45 pence a mile was standard. Standard now is 55 pence a mile, although I've gone from 55 to 50 if I can help productions a little bit. But you will be severely out of pocket if you're doing a lot of travelling on these things. Anyway, but that's just generally it. There's been some things changing for me in production, and I'm becoming a little bit more inclined to charge a little bit more in order to make my life easier. And it's really not about making more money, it's really about making an honest crust. Anyway, that's enough for today, although it's not really, because somewhere written, of course, right behind me, I wrote down 7 stoic lessons that I wanted to talk about, because, you know, as I say, that didn't go particularly well for me, that 12 weeks there. But stoicism's always something that can help you out. Hold on, I'm going to try and move my microphone so I can see my big whiteboard behind me. Right, I've got 7 lessons we can learn from the Stoics here. And I wanted to come back to Stoicism in this episode just because I didn't want you to feel that my failure was affecting me too greatly. I'm calling it a failure, but it's just, you know, my lack of success with my plan. But these are 7 lessons from the Stoics that might help you to move forward if you're having trouble. And there's whole episodes on Stoicism that you can go back and listen to as well, but I can't remember the episode numbers because this is an off-the-cuff episode, as you can probably tell. So, number 1, don't overindulge in food and drink. Okay? That's just a good life lesson, and I think on occasion I do overindulge, especially when I feel stress, and I have to be completely honest, I have felt stress over the past few weeks working on some of these productions, and it all comes down to communications. I have some productions that are fantastic communicators. Mayflies would be one that's brilliant at communicating, and I have others who I won't name who are absolutely shocking and leave you in it all the time. I've had a major problem on one of my projects this week, and it was not my fault, it was their fault. But there's a whole conversation I could be having on that one, and I'll probably include it in a future episode about blame. You know, if you do make a mistake, folks, here's what you do. You hold your hand up and say, it was my fault, I'm sorry, and then everyone knows where we stand and you move on. What you do not do is start telling lies, because that's just going to make things worse and worse. But number 1 on my list of lessons from the Stoics to end today is don't overindulge in food and drink. I don't have to say more about that one because you know why I'm saying it. You do know that. Number 2 is don't suffer before you need to. Don't suffer before you need to. So don't go worrying and panicking, say, about something that's coming up if there really isn't any problem at all. And that can happen, and you can start to get into that kind of negative cycle. The inner critic can take over on things, but don't suffer before you need to, before you get there and you have to, say, climb the hill. Don't worry before you get to the hill and then have to climb the hill. Don't suffer imagined troubles would be another way of saying that, and that's number 3 on my list. Don't think people are thinking or saying things about you because they probably aren't. Largely what I find when, let's say, a production or someone on production is having poor communications with you, is it's not because they dislike you, it's because either they're completely incompetent or because they don't think about you at all. That's the reality of it. But your mind, especially if you're an actor, can have you worrying about things that you don't have to be worried about. There was an actress yesterday, or an extra really, on the Mayfly shoot, and she was at the very back, and her feet were killing her, and she was frightened to take her shoes off in order to do this action. She was right at the back of a crowd of 200 people, and she could hardly stand in these shoes she'd been given to wear for the day, and she suffered all day for that, and it was all in her mind. There was her feet were never seen, and nobody really cared whether she was in her shoes or not. She actually had a pair of flat shoes there, but she suffered all day because she imagined that if she was to say, can I change my shoes, somebody would say, you're ruining the scene. Actually, that's genuinely where her headspace had got into. Anyway, number 4 on this list is don't compare yourself to others. Always remember, comparison is the thief of joy. Do not compare yourself to others. You are your own unique individual, and yeah, stick with that one. Comparison is the thief of joy. Number 5 on the list, I think I'm at 5. Don't tie your identity to things that you own. So don't tie your identity to things that you own. That would be that's again kind of maybe the technology thing where you feel that people are maybe hiring you because you've got a certain camera, or you've got or you've always had the latest stuff. You might actually be hired because you're good at what you do. Consider that. Number 6, a good one, and I try to do this, but sometimes I fail, and it's don't talk more than you listen. Don't talk more than you listen. Got it? And finally, quite a good one. I find this difficult because I do the podcast and I have to kind of talk about stuff like this, but don't be overheard complaining. Don't be overheard complaining. That's not just by the boss, just by anyone. Try to, keep these thoughts to yourself. And that would include in that not even to yourself. Don't even complain to yourself. Try and look for the positive. Try and move forward. I know, and I've worked with them, actors who love a moan. I know first ADs. I know other people who love a moan, and actually they love that kind of drama. That's part of the toxic thing. But you start to get a reputation as the person who's gossiping or the person who's always complaining about stuff. It's not a good thing. And as I say, I'm saying that even to yourself because it can undermine your drive and make things more difficult for you if you start to kind of wallow in that complaining sort of mindset. So watch out for that one. So that's the 7 Stoic principles I just wanted to throw in there. I wanted to end with something that was vaguely productivity related. So that's as good a place to end as any. Although I do want to say, well, I don't know if this has been officially released yet, but well done to our new exec producer, Chris, from Artos Digital, because they've just won, I think for the second year running, Social Media Agency of the Year. Hold on a second, I've got something. The Scotland Prestige Awards, that was it. And I don't know if it's been announced yet. Am I allowed to talk about this, Chris? Anyway, go check them out. Their details are in the show notes. Chris is a good guy, good, reliable guy, and I've known him for many years, and he's absolutely storming ahead with his social media business, so that's a cool one. What else can I talk about? My friend Becky Manson's got a documentary. Hold on, I'm going to have to stop and look it up. And I'm back. That's the magic of editing. Yeah, it's called The Ballad of the Ballad of a Great Disordered Heart, and it premiered at Edinburgh International Film Festival there. That's one to look out for. It's beckymanson.com if you want to go and check out her stuff. She's got loads and loads of great films on her website. Go and check them out. She's a documentary filmmaker, and she's totally awesome. And also my friend Martin Robertson, who I'm going to have to look up again. He's also got a film which I think is out now. Let me just go and check. And I'm back again. Martin Robertson, he's got a movie out as well, which is also a documentary. And I think I think both of these might be associated in some way with Hopscotch Films. I could be wrong. But Martin's an awesome guy as well. And his spelling of his name is with a Y. I am Martyn. And his website is martinrobertsonfilms.co.uk. So please go and check those guys out. Both awesome, brilliant people. And let's say Chris is doing really, really well as well with his agency. So I'm going to end it there. Could ramble on for ages, but I have somewhere here a quote which I was considering using from Sun Tzu, which is, strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So although I went into that with a strategy and it didn't quite work out, I think if I did nothing at all, I would be absolutely nowhere at all. I'm just looking below this here on this website, and here's one from Donald Trump. Sometimes by losing a battle, you will find a new way to win the war. I know you don't like. There's loads of people who don't like Donald Trump. I've got a thing to say, though, about Donald Trump. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, he's an arse. There's no two ways about it. He might even admit that himself. But there are a few things that he's said and done that maybe are good things. This is how I lose an audience, isn't it? By talking about Donald Trump. Never done it before. I can't vote for him. It's nothing to do with me. But he just happened to be the quote below the Sun Tzu quote on AZ quotes. It's not my fault. Just thought I'd chuck it in there. But yeah, I think there's a thing these days which is cancel culture. I really don't like cancel culture. Even for Amber Heard, who is a nightmare, it would appear to me, as just a casual viewer, don't attack me for it, but to me, Amber Heard, nightmare. Does she deserve to have her whole career destroyed because of this? No. She has had her kicking. Will she learn a lesson? That's a different thing. I don't know. Let her move on with her life. Donald Trump, cancelled by many people. Let him move on. By many people, not cancelled, of course, as well. Some people, many people, agree with him. I'm gonna steer away from Donald Trump now. I'm gonna get myself into no end of trouble. But cancel culture, not really something I believe in at all. I believe if people have had their punishment, they should be allowed to move on. It's only fair. So what a rambling episode that was. I'm in a bit of a rush. I've got to be honest. I have so many fights on the go. I've got an hour and 5 minutes left to get all this edited down to something that's presentable. But I didn't want you to miss out on an episode tomorrow. And we'll be back to the normal format from next week onwards. And as I say, I've got about 5 shows in the can, so I won't be rushing any more of them. Thanks for joining me here today. I realise your time is very valuable. This one was a little bit longer. A few of you will be thanking me for that, because I know you like to listen when you walk your dog. I've heard wee people tell me, wee birdies have been telling me you like to listen when you walk your dog. In too short an episode, you don't get a full dog walk out of it. Hopefully this is going to work for you. Anyway, that's enough for just now, and let me look at what I've got to say at the end. Yeah, I don't have a nice quote to end with that's going to cue beautifully into the music, so let me just scan down the page and find something that's vaguely relevant. Okay, here we go. Here's one from Lauren Bacall, who said, "You don't always win your battles, but it's good to know you fought. Now take control of your own destiny. Keep on rocking. Keep on shooting. And join me next time on Film Pro, Productivity and Success. The music that you can hear right now is Adventures by Himitsu, and the executive producer for this season is Christopher McPhillips from Artos Digital. You can see the show notes for this episode on really any of the apps, but if you go to filmproproductivity.com, you'll get a little bit more information there. Please follow me on LinkedIn. There's a page for Film Pro Productivity, but there's also my own page, Carter Ferguson. Check me out there. And also, please continue to support the show by subscribing, spreading the word, and leaving an awesome review.